Do you love cookbooks? Listen to a lot of food podcasts like this one? Love to eat? The first ever Cookbook Fest is making its way to Napa Valley, California this June. Part book festival, part food festival, part cooking adventure, Cookbook Fest is all about bringing your favorite cookbooks to life. Join some of your favorite cookbook authors like Jesse Sheehan, Tyler Florence, Bryant Terry, and Josh Shearer. Plus, my Korea World co-author Dookie Hong will be there all weekend, firing up the grills at the festival's Global Fire opening party and joining a live main stage recording of the great food podcast Copper and Heat. Don't miss these 3 days of live podcast recordings, hands-on culinary interviews, book signings, delicious food and drink, live music, and so much more. Go to cookbookfest.com to purchase a ticket. That's cookbookfest.com.
From a consumer standpoint is that people did overdrink at the beginning of the pandemic, and I think it accelerated the excitement around NA in the US. And then we come out of the pandemic and people want to make lifestyle corrections. And adjusting drinking habits was a huge part of it.
This is Taste. I'm your host, Matt Rodbard. Today in the show, I have a great conversation with Louis Catazzoni. He is the founder of St. Agrestis, which makes Amaros and Negronis, but also they make probably my favorite NA cocktail around, the Phony Negroni. We get into the inception and creation of this great drink. Many of you have written in and love this thing, and we talk all about it. We also talk about what it's like to launch an NA product or spirit or just working in the NA world in general. It's an up and down journey, but things are looking really great for St. Agrestis, and I hope you enjoy my conversation. Louis Catazzoni, welcome to This Is Taste. How are you?
Doing well. How are you, Matt?
It's great to meet you. I am such a big fan of St. Agrestis, the Phony Negroni, and your new line of products. Been drinking it for years, I feel. Maybe not years, but 2 years at least. How the F did you come up with this NA cocktail that tastes just like a Negroni? How did you come up with that?
I mean, the journey of landing at the Phony Negroni begins long before we knew we were R&Ding a Phony Negroni, if I'm being totally honest about it. We began R&Ding what would later become our Inferno Bitter and our bottled alcoholic Negroni in 2016. Mm-hmm. And much of the supply chain that we started establishing then is still being utilized to create the Phony Negroni. We're just not, you're not
adding gin. There's no gin involved.
Exactly. But the same 30 botanicals that we worked on sourcing way back then and got really good at finding the best farmers and brokers to bring to Brooklyn and turn into Negroni flavors, those plants are what go into the Phony Negroni. So I think years of supply chain really is what it comes down to as far as it tasting as close to a Negroni as it does.
Well, I mean, what I like about the Phony Negroni, we'll talk about the main product, is not just the way it drinks, but the finish. The finish is bitter in a way, and I don't drink. I've haven't had Negroni in almost a decade, but I certainly used to drink Negronis all the time. And it was great. And there's like a finish with gin and vermouth. When you compare, you get this like. It's not like you can say what you say the finish is, but it's like bitterness, and somehow that you retain that in an NA cocktail. Am I talking nonsense, or is there something to that?
No, I mean there is something to it. We're kind of Negroni snobs, so we not just from like the simplest palate form. We wanted it to have all the complexity, all the nuance, the start, the finish, the nose.
Yeah, the nose.
Everything that a Negroni would have. We didn't want it to be close to a Negroni. We wanted it to taste as close to a Negroni as possible. And the finish is a big part of that. And I think a lot of work went into that and making sure that the bitter backbone really lingers without extracting those alcohols. With alcohol, it's complicated, but we spent years figuring it out.
Yeah. Let's go back and talk about your career a little bit. I saw on LinkedIn that you worked at Altria as a rep on the road. What was that job all about?
uh, well, I got recruited out of college at like a career fair to work for Altria. I interned with them the summer before my senior year of college. And they offered me a job the day before.
Was it Philip Morris at the time, or was it Altria?
It was Altria.
Yeah.
And they offered me a job. They had already left New York and moved down to Richmond, their headquarters down to Richmond. But they offered me a job the day before my first day of my senior year. And I'm first generation Italian American. I called my parents and they're like, yeah, you take that job.
Yeah.
Company car, signing bonus, all the things. But I was never passionate about it. It was a good start to the career. They invest a lot in their training. But it's kind of strange to be out championing tobacco and then coming home, turning the TV on to unwind for the day, and the first thing you see is a commercial for people to stop smoking paid for by your company. It's a bit odd.
Yeah.
So
your hand is tied behind your back.
Yeah, and there's no room for creativity.
No.
There's no room for innovation, which rightfully so, but that's not what I wanted out of an industry or a career.
But
so
you wanted a career. You wanted to start and learn corporate culture and also like learn to sell. I'm sure that has been segued to St. Agrestis. And I feel like selling tobacco. I mean, were you working in innovation with tobacco, like new products?
I mean, I was helping launch products as they were innovated, but no, the innovation side of Altria was definitely a corporate Richmond, Virginia thing. And I was based up here. So also a strange place to be selling tobacco in a city where it's extremely taxed as a way to stop use. It was a good start to the career. To your point, I got to go down to headquarters a few times during the almost 2 years that I worked there to do like real sales boot camps that were invaluable. I mean, crazy helpful in a spirits world where like I think we kind of fly by the seat of our pants as far as sales in our industry. Yeah. It's like you were a bartender, you were a server, maybe you managed programs. Eventually you start selling because you want to get back out from behind the bar. There's not really training that is super well established, especially at the smaller brand or smaller distributor level. It's like, cool, let me make you knowledgeable, and then hopefully you're good at selling. So having a sales kind of foundation definitely has been helpful.
Oh my gosh. And then you ended up obviously nerding out about distilling.
Yes.
So when does that enter the fray? And when do you realize you want to actually make an Amaro, make products that are distilled and then eventually end up in the NA world?
So leaving Altria, I knew I wanted to go into alcohol. I thought I wanted to go work for a big company like a Diageo because all I knew was a big corporate job. Yeah. And I liked the comfort of that big corporate job. Yeah. But I fell in love with craft. My first job in the spirits industry was working for my now business partner, Stephen D'Angelo, who's the founder of Green Hook Gin. Yep. So I started small, thinking honestly that maybe I would get experience working for a small brand and use that to go apply for a job at a big brand. And I just fell in love with craft. I loved being around being in the distillery, I love being able to wear multiple hats and be involved in production ideas, sales ideas, marketing ideas, like the experience that you get working for a 2-person company as your first job in the industry is exciting. So, and then I went on to go work in distribution for a little while.
Oh, okay.
I worked for Skurnik, who is a New York-based distributor. Yep. And in the early days of a spirits portfolio that has really grown over time. And it was amazing. I was flying to Oaxaca and learning about mezcal production. I was flying to the French Caribbean and learning about rum agricole production. Yeah. Within the U.S. and Europe, just learning about all these different spirits. And I wasn't necessarily sure that was all leading towards St. Agrestis. I didn't know for sure. I mean, I just figured I'd work hard, I'd absorb, I'd learn, and eventually, if I wanted to make some sort of an entrepreneurial leap of faith, if I worked hard, the stars would hopefully align. And I just didn't know what that was necessarily going to lead to. And St. Agrestis was the perfect thing at the perfect time.
I mean, let's go back to gin, because when you're doing Green Hook and you're working with the founder of Green Hook, and that's a heady day for gin, like small batch local gin, right?
Yeah.
And this is like a time when gin was being acquired by the big boys, and like the margins on gin are great if you do it right. It's a good business. So were you feeling at the time that gin had a huge growth opportunity, and that you were learning a lot, that this like margin was like driving your interest in spirits? Because like you weren't working with bourbon, which is a totally different business structure, and you weren't in Kentucky, for example. You could do it in New York, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Long Island, right?
In Brooklyn,
Or
in Greenpoint.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think what was most exciting about the gin category at that time to me was just like the botanical knowledge really started to become, that was the foundation of it beginning. The botanical just fascination, ratios and all of that really began during that time, and seeing botanicals coming in and learning how much a botanical can change from one batch to the next, and then also how that can lead to a different flavor in an entire finished product. But yeah, gin was so exciting during that time. It was also like pretty competitive.
Yeah.
There were some New York distilleries that were literally gunning for big victories and kind of going up against each other, and it was a lot of fun.
Oh my God, yeah, like Brooklyn Gin.
Yeah.
There are two of them, right? They're called Brooklyn. They're
yes, there's Brooklyn Gin, and then there's Brooklyn spelled the Dutch way.
The Dutch way, right?
Yeah.
I remember those two gins were fighting it out in that game. Plus you guys. I mean, there's a lot of really nice domestic gins happening.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's some really good gin being made in Brooklyn still.
Yeah.
Not all of those brands still exist even, that were in the battlefield back in 2012 to 2014.
Yeah, it was an interesting time. I was writing about spirits a bit myself at that point, and heady days. Money was flowing pretty freely. Cash was cheap. Startup was happening. Let's get into the founding of St. Agrestis. How do you start it? What's the first product?
So St. Agrestis begins with Amaro.
Yeah.
And then eventually the next subsequent releases are Negroni. And I think some people still refer to St. Agrestis as an Amaro company.
Yeah.
I like that. I like that that's our reputation. We've become more and more synonymous with Negroni over time, and more every day, which I'm also quite proud of. But I like that when we get a piece of press and they're talking about the NA category and its growth and how well certain brands are doing in it. If St. Agrestis gets mentioned, often St. Agrestis is called an Amaro company from Brooklyn, New York. And I love that that's where our kind of reputation begins, because I think it gives us credibility beyond being an RTD company who might just be sourcing ingredients. We're not just
you're making the raw materials.
Exactly.
I mean, the gin in your Negroni. Do you say where that comes from?
Yeah, it's Green Hook Gin.
Okay,
it says it right on the bottle. Yeah, why wouldn't it be?
Exactly. I was gonna say if it wasn't a local gin, it'd be kind of silly. And then, are you using a vermouth that is local as well, or
we make the vermouth? You
make it, so it's part of your process.
Yeah. So we for the vermouth that goes into our bottled alcoholic Negroni, we import wine from Piemonte. Cortese is the wine, and then we fortify it in Brooklyn into like a classic Torino style vermouth, and that combined with Green Hook Gin and our Inferno Bitter Aperitivo is the completed Negroni.
Yeah. What did Campari say when you launched Inferno?
I don't know.
I mean, you must have been at Tales of the Cocktail talking to some of those, those Campari America folks, and hey, nice product. I'm sure not, but
no, I think perhaps more so than the Inferno Bitter Aperitivo. Maybe we caught some attention when we launched the Negroni.
Yeah,
I mean, our bottled Negroni was for sure the first bottled Negroni in America in a single serve format. There were larger format things in the past, but like single serve RTD format, we were the first ones to do it. We might have been the first ones to ever do it in the world. So I think like all of a sudden it was like, wait a second, Negroni is so synonymous with Campari. A different brand can call something a Negroni. And I think that became like sort of a light bulb for not just big Italian aperitivo producers, but like small RTD companies in the US said, "Oh wow, I can call something a Negroni.
Yeah,
I'm gonna
similar to the
can
way
one."
similar to the way the gin boom happened, the RTD boom happened.
Totally.
And I love that you're planting the flag that you were the first, because I believe it's accurate, because it was really the first I tried. And I want to segue into going NA, because RTD NA, really challenging category for years. I mean, really not a great selection. And, I'm sure you knew that. So how do you build the Phony Negroni out of this ethic of doing the Negroni? And then, of course, we can talk about some of your other Phony products.
Sure. So I went to Bar Convent in Berlin in 2019. And it was actually, it's kind of funny to think back at like what I dreamt having a little table at Bar Convent in Berlin as St. Agrestis might be. The truth is, I landed in Berlin with my then girlfriend, now wife, and my cousin from Italy, who grew up on the border of Italy and Austria up in Alto Adige, met us. So we had a German speaker, an Italian speakers, and an English speaking.
Louis, you were set.
We were set.
That's how you do Berlin.
It's how you do Berlin. Except we didn't, every other brand is there, and they built out like a replica of their tasting room, or, their super elaborate, kind of booths. And we just had a literal table and the bottles on the table. And it was amazing. The response.
It's kind of punk rock.
It's Amaro from Brooklyn.
Kind of punk rock.
It was. And it felt it's always felt, St. Agrestis has always felt a little bit like we're the indie musicians who are like, there's no record label. It's us running around doing the thing, trying to. I was delivering out of the back of my car for so long.
I mean, the Camparis of the world and, all the big boy Amaros of the world are Maletti, and those are like the Warner and Atlantic Records. And here's you in Brooklyn doing your indie shit. It's cool.
Yeah, it was so, and we just like bootstrapped it and grassrooted it and poured for as many people as possible. And like, I don't know, maybe like in-store tastings was the Napster of me.
Metaphors is going, strong.
Whatever. So the exciting part about NA as a result of that trip to Berlin was that despite all of this investment in going to Bar Convent by all these big liquor brands, the most exciting brands that were there were non-alcoholic. And there was so much excitement around, especially non-alc beer, but non-alc in general. And I felt like at that point, for the first time, for sure, it was going to come to the U.S.
What timestamp it? When is this?
This is October of 2019.
Yeah.
First week of October 2019. By the way, pandemic starts a few months later, right? And all the conversations with potential import partners in Europe just stop immediately. And we're left with kind of needing to wrap our heads around the fact that the money, which was substantial for a business of our size at that time, to go to Berlin just didn't actually lead to any sales. It didn't lead to any export partnerships or anything like that. But what we didn't know is that it inspired the Phony Negroni, and that the Phony Negroni would eventually be released and eventually be the most important SKU that we produce. We just didn't know it yet. So it felt a little bit like a waste of money and a waste of time to go to Germany. And it just wasn't. It was the light bulb. And a week after the trip, my business partner, Steven, came up with the name Phony Negroni.
Yeah.
And then we trademarked it, and that's that.
That's it.
And then we didn't launch it until January 11th of 2022.
That was when you launched it, 22. Wow.
Yep. January 11th, 2022.
Louis, you've been busy.
I have been.
It's 2 years old. Wow. I mean, my observation about your brand is this. It's in the best restaurants. And that's really where I believe you can get credibility for a direct-to-consumer RTD, is seeing it in and bars too, obviously, but like restaurants. Because when you look at a bar list and you say, wow, there's, an NA beer, Athletic obviously was crushing in 22, and you see maybe a Phony Negroni from St. Agrestis, and you're like at a great restaurant, like in Louisville or in New Orleans or Chicago. And then you order one, obviously, because I'm always looking for NA drinks, and I'm often disappointed And so I think there was like obviously a connection being made from people who understand beverage that you were in these restaurants. So clearly you had a plan to get out there into like some influential places. So can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, when we launched the Phony Negroni, we thought it was going to be a line extension that would perform like any of our other SKUs. You know, it was going to be, we had 4 items on the market at that time, 3 spirits and a ready-to-drink Negroni. And we thought it was going to perform just as any as those do. And it was not the case from day one. But there's sort of a blessing in the way New York law is written around liquor. And we didn't expect it to be a blessing on day one. But our retail network can't sell the Phony Negroni. Because in New York, wine and spirit shops can sell wine and spirits, but they cannot sell NA.
Yeah.
Which is something that almost no one knows. Like the amount of times people come in, they fly in from other parts of the country, they go to the liquor store, they buy a bottle of gin, they want tonic. They have to be told.
Yeah, you can't buy anything at liquor stores.
No.
You can't buy food either, which is a big problem too.
Exactly.
For food deserts.
And the concept is so strange to people who've grown up or lived anywhere else because you can buy liquor and cheese at the same store in most places, but not here in New York. And that was, in the end, in hindsight, really good for us because this is our home market, and we were established in the on-premise, not quite to the degree that we are now, but we were established in the on-premise here in New York. So we couldn't go see our normal retail friends. We had to go see our on-prem friends, and the response was immediately very, very warm, and then the volume was immediately much higher than we expected. So we were like, yeah, let's focus entirely on getting this into as many of the on-prem as possible. And then it's sort of like many products have in the past, in like the right circles, snowballed without us even having to touch it in some cases. Bartenders, bar managers drinking less than we used to. So if you were having a dinner out on a night off and you found Phony Negroni, chances are at some point you emailed us and got in touch with us as opposed to us having to go in and kick your door down.
I mean, it was certainly like a level of clout if you carried it in your bar. I feel like at some point, obviously 22 is probably the earliest, but like even in 23, you could see it. I'm sure places that, brought it in with the idea that this is going to make a statement in our NA list, right?
Yeah. I mean, especially in those days, there weren't in all cases NA menus, NA sections of menus, and there still aren't. Let's be real. Even here in our bubble of New York, there still aren't NA sections of every menu. But you brought up Athletic before, and if Athletic was doing well, it was like, well, why wouldn't we bring in this thing that tastes just like a Negroni and that people love?
Yeah, if they're selling like a level of Athletic, there's an appetite for doing NA. Let me ask you about that initial buzz, that initial, like it started selling better. Is that just because the product market fit was perfect, to use a business term? Like it was just really like a great product for this like market that was drinking less, and like way better than anything else, like by a long shot?
I think that definitely has a lot to do with it. I think we were the right product with the right flavor profile.
Yeah.
At the right price.
Not sweet, which is, I think that's the way I would articulate it. Like the right flavor profile, which is complexity with a bitter finish and not Kool-Aid.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think the right product also comes down to the color. Like it looks like a Negroni. The right package, being in glass, very important for us because you can see that beautiful opulent red hue and it not be totally blocked by a can. Also, we needed to be in a package that was presentable at the fancy restaurants that we wanted to be in and the prolific cocktail bars that we wanted to be in because we wanted them to present the bottle.
Do you feel like I'm just going to be frank, like the shittiness of all of these like liquor proxies, these NA proxies, I'm going to be bully, but say like Seed Lips of the world. Because God, I was given like how many bottles of Seed Lip and I never liked it. I never could find a way to mix it. I'm sure there's great ways to mix with Seed Lip, but I personally couldn't find it. But the fact that you were able to do something really impressive in an NA category with all this money towards NA spirits being poured in and people having like a really negative response.
I think that we had to overcome in launching our first alcoholic RTD.
Yeah.
We had to overcome preconceived notions that an RTD couldn't be good.
Yeah.
Because there weren't quality RTDs on the market yet. It was us and the Rock and Rye from Hochstedler's.
Yeah,
that was it. It was just those two when we launched the Negroni. Fast forward to when we launched the Phony Negroni, and I think we were turned away by beverage directors and probably by the consumers who had tried things and didn't necessarily enjoy them. Our goal was always to just be like, but you got to try it, you know? But okay, hey, I'm knocking on your door, which the amount of doors I've pulled on just in this borough alone, Manhattan, is insane. But I pull on the locked door, and then when you get the right person, they say, oh, NA, no, I'm not interested. I haven't had anything that I like yet. Or it's a lot of work. It's 10 ingredients to make something, taste right. And it's like, cool, that's not this.
Yeah.
You gotta try this. And I think that there's a lot of quality NA out there. In fact, I've had some amazing cocktails with Seedlip.
Yeah.
I think it is intimidating for the consumer.
That's what I'm saying.
To then go home and think they can recreate that, because let's call it what it is. A good bartender isn't living in every single home in America.
Right.
Some people who like making cocktails at home are competent. Some are good. Some are great.
Yeah.
But the average consumer who's no longer drinking, you're not going to go home and necessarily make a 9-ingredient with 3 special syrups and
especially with the baseline of the Negroni being a 3-part drink.
Definitely.
Right. And then you don't want to make an NA version of the Negroni with 16 items or even 5, because that's 2 more than what we are used to. And I think no one's making drinks with more than 5 components. Yeah. I mean, there are obviously hobbyists, but no.
Sure, I agree. And the amount of times folks said, "Oh, we're making something like a non-alcoholic Negroni, a no-groni."
Yeah.
And then we walk in, they taste and damn, this thing's better than what I'm making. I don't have to spend 3 hours doing prep in the kitchen or have my bar backs doing prep in the kitchen. And the price works. So why would I continue to make my thing that's inferior and cost more?
Yeah. So let's get down to the formulation of the NA Phony Negroni. Was it a long process to get there, or was it snap a finger and it's there?
Yeah, it was a long process. The nice part about it was we spent so much of our time pre-pandemic out doing sales, and the pandemic actually created this nice opportunity for us to be able to sit inside the distillery and for myself and Steven to do some really in-depth experiments and combinations. And that man is very talented.
Mm-hmm.
And just tweaking and we couldn't go see anybody. We weren't flying to California to go do sales. We weren't even, going into Manhattan or other parts of Brooklyn to do sales. We were stuck in the distillery.
Yeah.
And, we started, the concept was born in 2019. The product wasn't launched until 2022. And that was R&D. That was serious, sometimes very intense R&D.
Yeah. It's interesting how the pandemic helped certain individuals along the way.
I mean, look,
stop and slow down and actually figure out what you really needed to sell.
Yeah. I mean, it put things into perspective for so many people.
Yeah.
For us, it was, we thought we were going to go out of business. I mean, anyone who was deeply involved in on-premise in this category or in the industry in general, not just here, but across the world. If you paid your bills because of the on-premise, you thought you were going to go out of business, and we thought we would go out of business. But we just reinvented ourselves every day and figured it out, and reinvented ourselves and figured it out, and we survived it. And I think the other part of the pandemic, from the consumer standpoint, is that people did overdrink at the beginning of the pandemic,
mm-hmm.
and I think it accelerated the excitement around NA in the US. I just think we weren't necessarily going to be where we are today without folks sitting at home and being so scared of what was going to happen and drinking to kind of fix that. And then we come out of the pandemic and people want to make lifestyle corrections. And adjusting drinking habits was a huge part of it. Whether people went sober or just said, I don't drink Monday through Thursday anymore, or I will do dry January every year, or sober October, or whatever it is. Whether you're fully sober or not, I think a lot of folks evaluated their drinking habits. I think a lot of that had to do with drinking too much for a while.
Yeah, no, it's well said, Louis. I think you bring up a point that we really haven't touched on this podcast, is that those first few months into the first year of pandemic, we had a lot of lifestyle changes as a culture, some good, some bad, but you came out of it on top with this great product. Let's talk a little bit about the actual size of your Phony Negroni, your Phony line. And then I want to talk about some of the new products that you're doing. But how big is it? Like, how big are you? I mean, you can tell me whatever metric you want, but like the growth from 22 to 23.
Yeah, 22 we launched the Phony Negroni, and we doubled that year. But when I say we launched it, like we were filling it until August on a handheld filler.
Oh my gosh, really?
Yes, 8-head handheld filler, bottles exploding in our faces.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, crazy. Just not. It was only in New York and available direct to consumer, and we were having a hard time keeping up with demand that way. And then
that's not a bad problem.
No, it's not a bad problem unless you've stood on that bottling line for 8 hours with bottles exploding in your face. It kind of isn't fun. But the bottling line we had already invested in, we just didn't. It hadn't arrived yet. So when it did arrive in August, we were able to actually sell it to our wholesale network, and it was only available outside New York and DTC from August through the end of 2022. And it accounted for half of our sales in 2022.
As a company?
As a company.
My goodness, that was like one SKU you thought was just going to be doing okay.
Exactly. And compared to 4 others combined, big deal for us, and changed our business. It was essentially like we started a new business. And then 2023, we doubled again, which I never thought that St. Agrestis would be as big as it is at this point. Yeah, I don't think I could have dreamt it. I'm not like I'm optimistic. I just don't think I could have dreamt.
You're confident. So you didn't build it to scale up by any means.
I mean, like we definitely wanted it to scale. We thought that the Negroni, when it launched, I don't know if you remember, it was exciting when the Negroni launched. I thought that was going to be our hero SKU. And then other RTDs hit the market, and maybe our pricing wasn't perfect quite the way the Phony Negroni's pricing is perfect.
So I'm cracking some bottles here. I've been drinking this whole time. I'm going to do the mezcal now because I haven't tried it ever. And it's definitely one of the spirits that I think a lot of NA has tried to do.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't hit.
I'm not sure I could make a non-alcoholic mezcal, but I can very proudly pour that for you and say the Phony Mezcal Negroni, the mezcal component is there.
It starts with the nose.
Yeah.
As you said, and that's one of those things that you just can't replicate. Well, I guess you did.
Well, I really, I have a lot of respect for mezcal. I think it's the most rustic and terroir-driven spirit on the planet. And like, that's an Amaro maker saying it, it's just such a magical spirit. Oaxaca's such a magical place, and other mezcal producing parts of Mexico it's just such a special tradition and spirit. And I felt like if we were going to put the word mezcal on a bottle, we needed to be as unapologetically on a mission to make it feel like it was being done justice, the same way we did about the Negroni. Like we could have called it the Phony Smoky Negroni.
Yeah.
But I didn't want it to just be smoke.
I love that.
We wanted it to be vegetal. We wanted it to be earthy. We wanted it to
wanted to taste agave.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we experimented with a bunch of different ingredients to accomplish that. But what we ended up landing on was nopales.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Cactus petals. Cactus petals. Smoked for 90 minutes in a custom built smoker. My dad is from Calabria, but he is like strangely obsessed with Americana culture. I grew up in a RV family, which is kind of bizarre. When a family of 4 boys roll up to like a campground in the Carolinas, and a man with an Italian accent comes out and he's like handing homemade supersata and prosciutto to the other folks in the RV park or the campground. It's kind of a strange thing, but
he's the most popular guy at the campground.
Yeah, they love him. They love him. But he's always been obsessed with smoking meats and grilling, and we built the custom smoker for the for the nopales, and we had a lot of fun doing it. He, I think, wishes we were still in the R&D phase, but because it was a good time. But yeah, smoking the nopales ended up being the winning formula for the Phony Mezcal Negroni.
It's the coffee product, the coffee Phony Negroni, which I've just sampled myself. Is you're just going head on towards the espresso martini. You're just going after it.
Yeah, I mean, the espresso martini kind of, came into my lane. So now we're going into the espresso martinis lane, if that makes sense. And what I mean by that is after dinner used to be the Amaro's time to shine. And then so many folks started turning to espresso martinis. And it's like, oh man, Amaro, I think, lost a lot of momentum, the category, as a result of the pandemic. And then at the other end of the pandemic, when folks are starting to go out again, there's this huge resurgence of popularity of the espresso martini. And it's like, oh man, now that used to be the Amaro list's time. And now it's just, pounding 2 or 3 espresso martinis after dinner.
Such a shame.
Yeah. So no, we drink a lot of coffee at the distillery, and we felt like a cafe Negroni is just an excellent variation on it. If a mezcal Negroni is my favorite variation of a Negroni, a cafe Negroni is right there too. So we wanted to kind of create something like that, and landed on the Phony Espresso Negroni. Threw the word espresso in because it is just hot right now, and we're using espresso.
Yeah.
And the Phony Espresso Negroni has definitely, it's not, I wouldn't call it nuanced coffee notes. It's definitely there, but it's not quite like cold brew and Phony Negroni, which I've drank many.
Yeah.
It's a little bit more integrated than that would be.
Man, I want to close by just asking about future products, because clearly you're on a roll here. So you got the 4, right? The 4 Phony products.
Yep.
And after that, where do you go? Do you go into NA beers? Do you go into, other Italian spirits? Are you coming for Fernet?
I think we'll definitely stay in herbal.
Yeah.
Botanical bittersweet.
Sounds like Fernet might need to watch its back.
I think we would. Amaro also flirts with being an NA Fernet in some ways, but it's not. St. Agrestis Amaro leans Fernet to some palates, but the concept of an NA Fernet is not something that we haven't put some thought into.
Of course, obviously.
We'll definitely keep it Italian inspired. We'll definitely keep it herbal bittersweet. We were talking about doing a limoncello the other day.
Yeah.
And we would never launch an alcoholic limoncello because it's so easy to make at the end of the day. But an NA limoncello, you're like, whoa. But then I couldn't stop thinking about the fact that limoncello is so commonly served straight out of the freezer, and you just can't do that with NA.
Yeah.
So look, we're R&Ding. We're constantly testing some things out, and if we test them, they'll be tested in New York and on our website, and then we'll see if we think that it should be something that lives in the market. But our goal is to really just make sure that the Phony Negroni, we're not even in Texas. We're not in Florida. We're not everywhere by any stretch of the imagination. So I think we have a lot more work to do as a brand to make our current offerings more accessible and available.
Yeah. Are you in California?
Yes.
Is that a big market for you?
Yes. That's our second biggest market outside New York.
Yeah.
And we've only really been in last year was our first full calendar year. So, yeah.
I alluded to it. Were there some restaurants that embraced, St. Agrestis NA early on that you want to shout? Because I feel that was probably a big part of your success, was being the right menus.
Yeah, the entire Union Square hospitality group immediately adopted us. Not at every single spot, but by and large, and they've been supporters in that group for longer than we were making NA, and they still support our spirits portfolio.
Did Danny want to invest?
He never inquired.
Okay.
But there's just too many to name. Brooklyn has always supported us, but places like Misada in Fort Greene, a longtime favorite, Larina in Fort Greene too, Frankie's and Frank's Wine Bar, formerly Prime Meats, and so Chalet, those people are, they're family. They I walked in with the Phony Negroni and they said, send me 5 cases.
That's cool.
You know, it was special. And they still order that quantity whenever they need more. It's pretty amazing. Once people put the Phony Negroni on, they tend not to take it off.
Yeah.
It goes on the menu and it works.
I mean, it sells itself by name, but then when you back it up with a product, it's actually double, right? It's got a great name, but then it backs itself up. So, gotta say, it's great.
Thank you.
On This Is Taste, we ask guests about their discerning taste. So to close this interview, here's a little rapid-fire Fast and Furious taste check. Are you ready?
Sure.
The best fruit.
Do we count tomatoes?
I think tomatoes could be a fruit, so yeah.
I'll count a tomato.
Let's do it. The worst vegetable.
Poorly cooked asparagus.
Interesting. You mean like soggy and wilty.
Or like they don't cut the bottom of the stalk off the right way.
Yeah,
it's like chewy at the bottom.
You gotta,
I recently had some bad asparagus, and I like asparagus, but when it's bad, it is the worst.
Yeah, the woody stems, you gotta chill with those. The best dessert.
I've always loved eclairs.
Yeah.
Love them.
So good. So I mean when it's actually the texture and the cream hits.
If it's perfect, it's excellent.
Your favorite New York City restaurant?
Man, it's such a hard one. I always have such good meals at Cisiamo, and if I could live inside of Chef Hilary Sterling's gnocco frito, like if that was my sleeping bag, I would be really, really happy with that.
Yeah, I mean, Cisiamo, underrated. I mean, it's rated, obviously. It's got like a lot of reviews, but still underrated.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah, and I feel like, your product's there, obviously.
Yeah.
You guys are selling there.
Yeah.
Your favorite cocktail book?
I think Liquid Intelligence by Dave Arnold. Definitely. I feel like we take some of the techniques that people learned in that book for granted now, but they were only really like learned because of that book.
Your favorite city outside America to visit for food?
Outside America? Milan.
Best cocktail culture in Italy?
Yes,
so
by far.
Good. So good by far.
So good.
Your favorite sandwich?
An excellent eggplant parm.
Oh, yeah. You have a spot for it?
I live in Carroll Gardens, and there's this new-ish spot called Mutt's Lab. And yeah, it's good. It's substantial. It's really, really good.
I love to hear that. Louis Catazzone, thank you so much for joining This Is Taste. This Is Taste is hosted by Eliza Abarbanel and me, Matt Rodbard. The show is produced by Shalia Harris and Pat Stango and edited by Clayton Gumbert. Theme music by Steve Rydell. Visit Taste online at tastecooking.com and make sure to subscribe to our newsletter for updates on all cool things that are happening.